Welcome. This is a space for you to relax. Let your mind settle and your body soften. In the next few hours, you'll hear a calm and immersive story designed to help you fall asleep. There's nothing you need to do, nothing to worry about. Just listen gently as we explore tonight's topic in depth and in peace. And whenever you're ready, let go and drift into rest. Before towering stone pyramids rose above the forest canopy, before the scribes inked symbols into bark paper codices, before the ancient ball games echoed across sunlit courtyards, there was silence. Thousands of years ago, long before the first Maya city would be built, the lands of Mesoamerica were already filled with life. Dense jungle, rolling hills, rivers winding through deep valleys, and coastlines kissed by waves from the Caribbean and Pacific. This was a region of incredible natural diversity, and it would become the cradle of one of the most enigmatic and brilliant civilizations the world has ever known. To understand the Maya, we must first step back, far back, into the prehistoric past, origins in deep time. The ancestors of the Maya people have lived in this part of the world for tens of thousands of years. Archaeological evidence suggests that humans arrived in the Americas via the Bering Land Bridge, moving slowly southward, eventually settling throughout Central America. These early peoples were hunter-gatherers, living in small groups and moving with the seasons. Over time, they began to cultivate wild plants, most notably a grass that would become one of the cornerstones of their culture: maize or corn. Maize wasn't just a food source, it was a symbol of life itself, of renewal, survival, and cosmic balance. By 2000 BCE, the people of southern Mesoamerica had already begun to form agricultural villages. They raised beans, squash, chilies, and maize in rich, fertile soil. They built simple homes of thatched wood and developed pottery, weaving, and basic forms of social organization. This was the pre-classic era, the long formative period when the seeds of Maya civilization were being sown. Influences from the Olmecs. No great civilization emerges in isolation. Around the same time as the early Maya were developing their culture, another powerful group, the Olmecs, were flourishing in the lowlands of what is today the Gulf Coast of Mexico. The Olmecs are often called the mother culture of Mesoamerica. They carved massive stone heads from volcanic rock. They built ceremonial centers, practiced complex rituals, and developed early forms of writing and calendrical systems. And they influenced their neighbors, including the early Maya. Trade routes connected these early cultures, carrying not just goods like jade, cacao, and obsidian, but also ideas, religious concepts, and artistic styles. From the Olmecs, the Maya likely absorbed key elements of their later religion, urban design, and iconography. But the Maya were not merely imitators, they were innovators. They would take these ideas and transform them into something wholly unique. The rise of Maya settlements. By around 1000 BCE, small Maya villages had begun to grow into larger ceremonial centers. These were not yet cities in the sense we think of today, but they were gathering points, places for ritual, trade, and communal life. Some of the earliest known Maya sites include Nakbe, San Bartolo, and El Mirador, located in the Petén region of northern Guatemala. Here, the jungle hides secrets, ancient causeways stretching for miles, pyramids buried beneath centuries of forest growth, and fragments of murals that hint at a sophisticated culture already taking shape. El Mirador, in particular, is a marvel. At its peak, it may have supported tens of thousands of people, with some of the largest pyramids in the Americas. Even in this early stage, the Maya were showing a remarkable mastery of stone construction, urban planning, and symbolic art. Their cities were aligned to celestial events. Their buildings followed sacred geometry, and everywhere they etched their beliefs into stone. Gods, kings, rituals, and calendars, religion and cosmos. The Maya did not see the world the way we do. To them, the universe was a living, breathing, multi-layered thing. They believed in a three-part cosmos: the heavens above, the earth in the middle, and the underworld, Xibalba, beneath. Each level was connected by the world tree, an axis that united all realms. Caves and cenotes were sacred portals to the underworld, while mountains and pyramids connected the earth to the sky. Their gods were many, associated with rain, corn, sun, death, fertility, and time. These deities could take on human or animal forms, and they were deeply involved in the fate of mankind. Appeasing the gods through ritual was not just tradition, it was essential. Bloodletting, human sacrifice, dance, music, and offerings were part of a spiritual worldview that tied human life to cosmic order. The kings were not merely rulers, they were mediators between the mortal and the divine, and all of this was guided by time, a calendar of eternity. Few civilizations have ever been as obsessed with time as the Maya. They used multiple calendars at once, each with different purposes. The Tzolk'in was a 260-day sacred calendar used for divination. The Harb was a 365-day solar calendar that tracked the seasons. And the Long Count was a vast timeline, stretching back to a mythical creation date in 3114 BCE. These calendars didn't just mark time, they gave meaning to it. Every day had a spiritual significance, and major events were planned with celestial precision. The movements of the sun, moon, Venus, and stars guided everything from agriculture to war. And in their codices and monuments, the Maya recorded these cycles in incredible detail, tracking eclipses, solstices, and planetary alignments with an accuracy that rivals modern astronomy. Time to the Maya was not linear, it was cyclical, an endless dance of creation, destruction, and renewal. As the centuries passed, the Maya world began to change. What had once been scattered agricultural villages and small ritual centers slowly transformed into something more complex, more ambitious. A civilization of cities. This transformation happened gradually, beginning in the late pre-classic period, around 400 BCE to 250 CE. During this time, Maya settlements grew in size and sophistication, supported by a growing population and advances in agriculture, construction, and governance. The jungle, once a barrier, became the setting for a vibrant network of urban life. Maya urban design. Maya cities were not laid out like those of ancient Rome or Greece. They were not grid-like or symmetrical. Instead, they were organized organically, with plazas, pyramids, palaces, temples, and ball courts arranged around sacred centers. These centers were aligned with celestial events, solstices, equinoxes, and the movements of planets, making every city a mirror of the cosmos. At the heart of each city was the ceremonial core, massive stepped pyramids, where priests and kings conducted rituals atop platforms reaching into the sky. Nearby stood administrative buildings, elite residences, and ball courts used for the sacred Mesoamerican ball game. Beyond these central precincts, thousands of ordinary Maya lived in extended households made of wood and thatch, spread out into the surrounding landscape, often connected by raised roads called sac biob, white roads made of limestone. Water management was crucial in this environment. The Maya engineered reservoirs, aqueducts, and canals to collect and store rainwater, an essential innovation in the tropical lowlands where rivers were scarce. Power and kingship. As cities grew, so too did the power of their rulers. Maya kings were not simply political leaders, they were divine intermediaries, chosen by the gods, descended from the gods, and responsible for maintaining cosmic order. Their legitimacy came not from conquest alone, but from ritual performance and dynastic lineage. These kings, known as Kuhul Ajau, or Holy Lords, built monuments to record their deeds, their genealogy, their victories, and their connection to the gods. Stelae, tall stone slabs, were carved with images of the ruler in elaborate headdress and regalia, often with detailed hieroglyphic inscriptions beneath. These monuments were not meant to be read by the common people. They were read by the gods, by ancestors, and by future kings who would carry the legacy forward. Power among Maya kings was not absolute. It was negotiated, challenged, and sometimes violently taken. Warfare between city-states was common, and alliances were forged and broken through marriage, tribute, and conquest. But more than anything, kingship was a performance, a continuous ritual that had to be renewed through ceremony, bloodletting, and sacrifice. Tikal, the city of great kings. Among the many Maya cities, Tikal stands out as one of the earliest and most influential. Located in modern-day Guatemala, Tikal rose to prominence during the late pre-Classic and became a dominant power in the early Classic period, roughly 250 to 600 CE. Its skyline was marked by towering pyramids, some reaching over 200 feet into the air. Vast stone structures built without metal tools, wheels, or beasts of burden. Tikal was home to powerful dynasties, and its influence stretched across the Maya lowlands. It traded jade, obsidian, cacao, feathers, and salt with other cities, forming a vast economic network. Its kings ruled with divine authority, and they competed not just in battle, but in grandeur, commissioning ever larger temples, more ornate stelae, and more elaborate rituals. Tikal's greatest rival would soon emerge from the west, Calakmul, the Serpent Kingdom. Deep in the jungles of the Yucatan, the city of Calakmul rose to challenge Tikal's supremacy. Known for its snake emblem glyph, the Kanul dynasty, Calakmul was the seat of a powerful lineage that would come to dominate much of the southern Maya lowlands. The rivalry between Tikal and Calakmul defined much of Maya politics in the Classic period. These two superpowers clashed through direct warfare, proxy conflicts, and political maneuvering. They formed alliances with smaller city-states, drawing them into the web of Maya geopolitics. Kings from both cities claimed victories, suffered defeats, and documented their legacies in stone. Their struggle spanned generations, a long, slow war of influence and ambition. The Classic Maya period begins. Around 250 CE, the Maya entered what is known as the Classic period, a golden age of culture, architecture, writing, and political complexity. This was the era when Maya civilization truly flourished. Cities like Palenque, Copan, Yaxchilán, and Caracol reached their heights. Each had its own style of art, its own dynastic line, its own temples and palaces. The Maya hieroglyphic writing system reached its most advanced form, with scribes recording historical events, rituals, and cosmological texts in both stone and bark paper codices. Art became more refined. Jade masks, polychrome pottery, intricate carvings, and murals told the stories of gods and kings. Architecture soared to new heights with corbelled arches, ceremonial ball courts, and multi-level acropolises. This was not a unified empire, but a network of city-states, each competing for prestige, power, and divine favour. Yet for all its splendour, Maya civilization remained deeply spiritual, rooted in a worldview where every stone laid, every ritual performed, and every sacrifice offered had meaning beyond the physical. The sacred ball game. In every city, one could find a ball court, a long rectangular structure flanked by sloping walls, often decorated with carvings of players and gods. The ball game was more than sport. It was sacred drama. Played with a rubber ball and using only hips, elbows and knees, the game had deep symbolic meaning. It echoed the mythological battle between the hero twins and the lords of the underworld, as told in the Popol Vuh, the sacred Maya narrative. In this story, the twins descended into Xibalba, outwitted the gods of death, and emerged victorious, restoring balance to the cosmos. To play the game was to reenact this myth, to maintain the cycles of life and death. Sometimes the stakes were high. Captives might be sacrificed after a match, especially in the courts of great kings seeking to appease the gods. But the ball game was not only about death, it was about order, about cosmic balance, about movement and transformation. It was another thread in the intricate spiritual fabric of Maya life, a life where every act, no matter how mundane, was part of a greater story. By the 7th century CE, the Maya world was at its zenith. The classic period, roughly from 250 to 900 CE, saw the flourishing of art, science, writing, and monumental architecture. Dozens of city-states thrived, each with its own dynasties, unique artistic traditions, and political dramas. The jungle was alive with ceremony and sound, the music of drums, the chants of priests, the murmur of scribes, and the echo of stone tools striking stone. This era produced some of the most iconic figures in Maya history, rulers who would leave behind legacies carved into stone, preserved in the deep forest long after their voices fell silent. Let us now journey to two such cities, Palenque and Copan, where art and architecture reached breathtaking heights, and where the lives of individual kings tell the larger story of an entire civilization. Palenque, city of the incomparable Lord. Nestled in the misty foothills of Chiapas, Mexico, the city of Palenque was a jewel of the Western Maya world. Unlike the sprawling jungle cities of the lowlands, Palenque was built along river valleys, with terraces and aqueducts channeling water into the city. Its buildings were elegant, richly decorated, and infused with a refined aesthetic unlike any other Maya city. But what made Palenque truly legendary was its most famous ruler, Kinich Janab Pakal, known simply as Pakal the Great. Pakal came to the throne in 615 CE at the age of just 12, during a time of political instability. Over the next 7 decades, he would transform Palenque into one of the most powerful and artistically accomplished cities in the Maya world. Under his rule, the city's most iconic structures were built, including the Temple of the Inscriptions, which would later become his tomb. This towering pyramid was not just a monument, it was a message, a celestial beacon designed to honor his life and guide his spirit into the afterlife. Beneath it lay a secret staircase leading deep into the earth to a stone sarcophagus adorned with intricate carvings. Pakal himself depicted as a divine figure ascending the world tree into the heavens. His legacy was carried on by his descendants, who continued to build, to write, and to shape the city's destiny. Palenque was also home to some of the finest Maya sculpture and relief carving. Stucco masks and wall panels depicted gods, kings, and mythological scenes with fluidity and grace. The Maya here created a visual language of cosmic elegance, one that whispered of cycles, of transformation, and of time itself. Copan, the city of scholars and sculptors. Far to the south, in what is now Honduras, the city of Copan rose like a stone manuscript among the hills, Copan was a center of intellectual and artistic achievement, a city where sculptors pushed the limits of stone and where scribes recorded the deeds of kings in some of the most detailed hieroglyphic inscriptions in the Maya world. Its dynasty began around 426 CE, likely with influence from Tikal, and flourished for over 4 centuries. One of Copan's greatest rulers was Uakshaklajun Ub'a Kawil, also known to scholars as 18 Rabbit. He ruled during the 8th century and was a renowned patron of the arts. Under his direction, Copan became a stone canvas, filled with towering stelae, zoomorphic altars, and intricately carved temples. He commissioned some of the most beautiful and expressive portraits in Maya history, depicting himself as both king and god. Each monument was more than a tribute. It was a ritual, a way to embed his reign into the eternal cycles of time. Perhaps the most astonishing of all Copan's achievements is the hieroglyphic stairway, a grand staircase with over 2,000 individual glyphs carved into the steps, narrating the royal history of the city. It is the longest known Maya inscription, a winding epic of power, legacy, and myth. Yet like so many stories in Maya history, Copan's glory was shadowed by tragedy. Despite his cultural achievements, 18 Rabbit was captured and executed by a rival city, Quirigua, in a dramatic shift of power that revealed the fragility of even the most illustrious kingship. But Copan endured, continuing to thrive for a time, with rulers like Yaks Pasaj Chan Yopat restoring and expanding the city in the final years before its eventual decline. Art, writing, and mathematics. While the rulers built monuments to themselves, a quieter revolution was happening in the shadows, in the scriptoriums and codex rooms, in the observatories and temple archives. The Maya developed one of the most sophisticated writing systems in the ancient world, a combination of logograms and syllabic signs that could be arranged in poetic, complex ways. This writing wasn't just used for royal proclamations. It appeared on pottery, in books, on jewellery, and in murals. It was a living language of symbols, alive with nuance and beauty. Their scribes, often nobles trained in both writing and ritual, preserved myths, histories, astronomical data, and calendrical calculations in books made of bark paper, called codices. Only a handful of these survive today. The Dresden Codex, the Madrid Codex, the Paris Codex, and fragments of others. But they offer an extraordinary window into Maya science and spirituality. The Maya were also brilliant mathematicians. They developed a base 20 numbering system, used 0 centuries before it appeared in Europe, and could calculate astronomical cycles with startling precision. They tracked the movements of Venus, eclipses, and the long cycles of the calendar, creating almanacs and tables that guided ritual life and agricultural practice. This was a civilization that measured the heavens to understand the earth, that mapped time in spirals and counted the stars with reverence. City life and everyday people. While kings and scribes etched their names in stone, the vast majority of Maya people lived in simpler ways, as farmers, artisans, traders, and labourers. A Maya village was typically made up of extended families, living in thatched roof homes around a shared courtyard. Their diets centred on maize, beans, squash, and chili, foods that were sacred as well as practical. They grew cotton for cloth, cacao for currency and ritual, and raised turkeys and dogs for food. Women were central to home life and economy. They wove intricate textiles, ground corn on stone metates, and passed down traditions from generation to generation. Children were raised within the rhythms of planting and harvest, festival and fast. They played games, learned the stories of the gods, and grew into the roles their families had held for centuries. Even as cities grew vast and stratified, the spirit of the Maya world remained tied to the earth, to the soil, the stars, the rain, and the spirit world beneath. As the sun set on the 8th and 9th centuries CE, the golden age of the classic Maya began to wane. Temples still rose, rituals continued, and kings still claimed divine descent. But cracks were forming beneath the surface. Cities that once flourished with trade, art, and ceremony began to empty. Stelae were no longer erected. Palaces fell into ruin. The voices of kings faded into the jungle. By the end of the 9th century, much of the southern lowland region, once the vibrant heart of Maya civilization, was abandoned. What caused this mysterious decline? The truth, as always with history, is not one cause, but many, and even today scholars are still piecing together the puzzle. Environmental stress and drought. One of the most compelling explanations involves the land itself. The classic Maya were deeply tied to agriculture, particularly the growing of maize. Their cities, though magnificent, were built in a fragile environment. The limestone soils were thin, water sources scarce, and the surrounding forests had to be cleared for farming. As populations grew, the strain on the environment increased. Deforestation led to soil erosion. Overfarming depleted the nutrients. And then, nature delivered its final blow. Paleoclimatologists have found evidence of severe prolonged droughts during the period of the Maya collapse, especially in the 9th century. Without rain, the crops withered. Without crops, there was hunger. And without water, even the most sacred rituals could not restore cosmic balance. In a civilization where kings were seen as mediators between gods and people, the failure of rain and harvest may have been seen as a failure of leadership, weakening the authority of rulers and destabilizing cities from within. Warfare and political fragmentation. At the same time, the classic Maya were engaged in intense and prolonged warfare. Inscriptions from the period show a dramatic rise in conflict, cities attacking their neighbours, alliances breaking, captives being paraded and sacrificed, and monuments boasting of destruction rather than creation. As resources became scarce and populations strained, warfare may have escalated, not just for power, but for survival. This era saw the fragmentation of the old political order. Great cities like Tikal, Copan, and Karakol faced new challenges or collapsed altogether. Smaller centres rose briefly and then vanished. The carefully maintained web of alliances unravelled. Inscriptions became rarer. Buildings were left unfinished. Ball courts fell silent. What had once been a connected world of ceremonial power became a scattering of isolated, struggling communities. Social unrest and revolt. Another possibility is that the Maya collapse involved not just kings and gods, but the people themselves. Some scholars suggest that social unrest may have played a role. As elites grew more powerful, building ever larger monuments and demanding greater labour and tribute, commoners may have grown resentful. In some cities, there is evidence of royal monuments being deliberately defaced. Statues of kings were broken, inscriptions scratched out. This may reflect rebellion, a turning away from the traditional order. Perhaps the people no longer believed in the divine right of kings. Perhaps they simply walked away, leaving behind a system that no longer served them, not a collapse, but a transformation. It's important to remember that the Maya did not disappear. While the cities of the southern lowlands, like Tikal, Copan, Palenque, and others, were largely abandoned, the northern lowlands and highlands continued to thrive. Cities like Uxmal, Kabah, and most famously Chichen Itzá, rose to prominence during this time, ushering in what is known as the post-classic period. The Maya adapted. They moved, reorganized, changed their rituals, and embraced new political and economic systems. Trade routes shifted, religious practices evolved, but the culture, the language, the stories, the sense of time and cosmos remained. The collapse of the classic Maya was not the end, but a transformation, a passage through death into rebirth, echoing the very cycles that had always defined their worldview. Chichen Itzá, the city of serpents. In the Yucatan Peninsula, a new kind of Maya city was rising, one that blended old traditions with new influences. Chichen Itzá, built in the centuries following the classic collapse, became one of the most powerful and cosmopolitan centers in Mesoamerica. Unlike earlier Maya cities, Chichen Itzá shows clear influence from central Mexico, particularly from the Toltec civilization. Its art and architecture reflect a fusion of styles: feathered serpents, warrior columns, and images of the god Kukulkan, the feathered serpent deity associated with wind, wisdom, and renewal. The city's most famous structure is the Temple of Kukulkan, also known as El Castillo, a massive stepped pyramid aligned with the equinox sun. Twice a year, on the spring and autumn equinoxes, the setting sun casts shadows along the stairway that resemble a serpent slithering down the side of the pyramid. It is one of the most iconic astronomical alignments in the world, a testament to the Mayas' continuing mastery of space, time, and symbolism. Chichen Itzá thrived as a center of trade, pilgrimage, and ritual, drawing people from across the Yucatan and beyond. Its ball courts, cenotes, temples, and sacred texts continued the spiritual traditions of the past. Even as the world around it changed, Mayapan, and the end of the Maya kingdoms. After Chichen Itzá's decline in the 13th century, the city of Mayapan emerged as the last great Maya capital. It tried to unify the region under a confederation of noble families, maintaining old customs while navigating a shifting political landscape. But by the 15th century, even Mayapan had fallen. The Maya world became fractured again, divided into dozens of smaller kingdoms and towns, each with its own lords, its own rituals, its own alliances and rivalries. Still, the culture endured. When the Spanish arrived in the 16th century, they did not find ruins. They found living cities, active temples, and people who still spoke the languages of their ancestors and read the sky as their forebears had done for millennia. As the 16th century dawned, the Maya civilization, though no longer unified in powerful city-states like Tikal or Palenque, remained deeply rooted across the Yucatan Peninsula, the Guatemalan highlands, Belize, and parts of Honduras and El Salvador. Their kingdoms were smaller, their cities less monumental, but their culture remained intact. The sacred calendars continued to turn. The ball games were still played. The gods were still honored. And the stories of creation, sacrifice, and renewal still echoed through the generations. It was into this world that the Spanish arrived. Swords gleaming, ships anchored along the coast, crosses held aloft. They came with conquest in their hearts, and they would find in the Maya not a collapsed people, but a resilient, fiercely independent culture that would resist colonization for longer than almost any other civilization in the Americas. First contact. The first recorded European contact with the Maya occurred in 1502, when Christopher Columbus encountered a Maya trading canoe off the coast of Honduras. The canoe was large, well-built, and filled with goods, textiles, cacao, obsidian tools, and other trade items. The Spanish were impressed by the quality of the craftsmanship and the organization of the traders. It was a brief encounter, but it offered a glimpse into a world that was still thriving, still complex. The real invasion would come years later, with conquistadors who'd already conquered the mighty Aztec Empire. and now turn their gaze to the lands of the Maya. The conquest begins. Unlike the Aztecs, who were centralized in one vast capital, Tenochtitlan, the Maya world was fragmented into many independent kingdoms. This fragmentation both helped and hindered the Spanish. There was no single city to conquer that would bring down the entire civilization, but it also meant the Spanish had to fight many battles, negotiate many alliances, and face resistance at nearly every step. Hernán Cortés, after defeating the Aztecs, led a brutal march through parts of Maya territory on his way to Honduras in the 1520s. He encountered cities like Tikal and Itzá, but the Maya in these regions resisted conversion, tribute, and submission. In the Yucatan Peninsula, the conquest was led by Francisco de Montejo and later his son. Over decades, they launched campaigns against Maya cities like Chichen Itzá, Mayapan, and Uxmal. Some abandoned, others still inhabited. Despite their superior weaponry, the Spanish faced fierce guerrilla warfare, deadly jungles, and determined resistance. Entire towns would evacuate into the forest. Leaders would regroup and attack from the shadows. Many of the conquered cities were reconquered by the Maya again and again. The conquest of the Maya was not a single event. It was a century-long struggle, filled with ambushes, sieges, betrayals, and resistance, and survival. Some Maya regions were never fully conquered. The Petén Basin in northern Guatemala remained independent well into the 17th century. Here, the city of Tikal became a stronghold for the Itzá Maya, who continued to practice their traditional religion, resist Christianization, and maintain autonomy for over 150 years after the fall of the Aztecs. It wasn't until 1697 that the Spanish finally defeated Tikal, making the Itzá kingdom one of the last indigenous polities in the Americas to fall to European conquest. Even after military defeat, resistance did not end. Maya communities preserved their customs in secret. They blended their beliefs with Catholic symbols, hiding their deities behind saints. They passed down oral histories, maintained their languages, and kept their rituals alive in the shadows of colonial rule. Throughout the colonial period, there were uprisings, from the early rebellions of the 16th and 17th centuries to the massive caste war of the 19th century in Yucatan, where Maya communities rose up against landowners and soldiers in a bloody, decades-long conflict. The Maya did not simply vanish into history. They endured, they adapted, and they resisted. The loss of the codices, one of the most painful wounds inflicted during the Spanish conquest, was the destruction of the Maya written tradition. The Spanish viewed the Maya books, their codices, as heretical, filled with pagan knowledge and blasphemy. The friars, in their zeal to convert, destroyed hundreds, possibly thousands, of these sacred texts. In 1562, a Spanish bishop named Diego de Landa famously conducted an auto da fe in the city of Mani, where he burned countless Maya books and idols. He later regretted the loss, even as he tried to record what he could of Maya customs. Ironically, his own writings would become one of the few sources available to later scholars trying to understand the Maya. Today, only 4 known Maya codices survive: the Dresden, Madrid, Paris, and Grolier codices. Each is a window into a world nearly extinguished: calendars, astronomical tables, rituals, and symbols preserved against all odds. The loss of the Maya libraries was catastrophic. It was not just the loss of information, but of identity, memory, and continuity. Yet even this could not silence the culture completely. The legacy of the Maya language. Despite centuries of colonization, Maya languages are still spoken today. Over 6 million Maya people live in Central America, speaking over 30 distinct Maya languages, including Quiche, Yucatec, Quechua, Kachikal, and Tzotzil. These languages preserve ancient ways of thinking. They contain metaphors rooted in the stars, the land, and the gods. They carry ancestral knowledge passed down through generations of poets, farmers, healers, and priests. And through these languages, the Maya view of the world, cyclical time, sacred balance, the interconnection of all things, still endures. A culture that refused to die. The Spanish may have brought guns, disease, and forced conversion. But they did not bring the end of the Maya. The temples may have crumbled, the cities may have been swallowed by jungle. But the spirit, the sacred fire, never went out. In remote villages, rituals continued under the moonlight. The old gods were honoured in hidden shrines. Midwives still read the days in the sacred calendar. Elders told stories of the hero twins and the creation of the world. And in the centuries to come, archaeologists, linguists, and Maya scholars themselves would begin the long journey of rediscovery, uncovering the ruins, decoding the writing, and piecing together the history that others had tried to erase. Long after the last kings were buried and the temples left to the creeping vines of the jungle, the great Maya cities lay in silence, their stones cracked, their glyphs unreadable, their stories forgotten by the world beyond. And yet they remained, sleeping beneath centuries of forest. Then, beginning in the 19th century, the world would begin to rediscover the Maya. Slowly, cautiously, and often clumsily, explorers, archaeologists, and scholars would step into the jungle to awaken a civilization that had never truly died, only waited. The Age of Exploration. The 1800s marked a period of great curiosity about the ancient world. Inspired by the rediscoveries of Egypt and Mesopotamia, European and American travelers turned their attention to Central America. Among the first and most influential explorers was John Lloyd Stevens, an American diplomat and writer who journeyed through the Maya regions in the 1830s and 1840s. Alongside him was Frederick Catherwood, a British artist who created breathtakingly detailed illustrations of the ruins. Their books, particularly incidents of travel in Central America, Chiapas, and Yucatan, introduced the Maya world to the Western public. They described vast cities, Copan, Palenque, Uxmal, Tulum, covered in moss and vines, filled with pyramids, temples, and statues that seemed impossibly sophisticated. Stevens and Catherwood were among the first to argue that these cities had been built not by foreigners, but by the ancestors of the modern Maya. This was revolutionary at the time, a challenge to prevailing racist beliefs that native peoples were incapable of such grandeur. Their work sparked a wave of fascination with the Maya, and the long journey of excavation and interpretation began. Ruins in the jungle. As decades passed, archaeologists returned again and again to the Maya sites, clearing vegetation, mapping cities, uncovering stelae, and cataloguing thousands of artifacts. Cities like Tikal, Chichen Itzá, and Calakmul were gradually uncovered, their full scale only becoming clear with time. The discoveries were staggering: multi-level palaces, vast causeways, observatories aligned to celestial events, and artwork of astonishing complexity. Entire cities were found beneath the earth, their courtyards filled with rubble, their pyramids hidden beneath centuries of jungle growth. Every stone revealed a new clue, and every clue raised new questions. Who were these people? What had happened to them? What did the glyphs mean? For many years, the Maya writing system remained undeciphered, a silent script carved into monuments and pottery, filled with mystery. That would soon change, cracking the code. For centuries, the Maya script was considered undecipherable. Scholars debated its nature. Was it phonetic, symbolic, or something else entirely. Progress came in fits and starts. Early attempts at decipherment misunderstood the complexity of the system. Many believed it was purely ideographic, that is, each symbol representing a whole concept. But in reality, the Maya script was both phonetic and logographic, a sophisticated system that could represent sounds, syllables, and whole words. The breakthrough came in the 20th century, thanks to the work of several key figures. A Russian scholar, Yuri Norosov, proposed in the 1950s that the script was syllabic, that certain glyphs represented specific sounds. Though initially dismissed by Western scholars, his ideas laid the foundation for future work. Later, scholars like Tatiana Proskoryakov showed that many inscriptions were historical records, recounting the births, reigns, battles, and deaths of real kings. By the 1970s and 80s, a new generation of epigraphers, including Linda Shaley, David Stewart, and Peter Matthews, began to crack the code in earnest. It was like unlocking a time capsule. Suddenly the silent stones began to speak of dynasties, disasters, gods, rituals, wars, and alliances. The Maya were no longer anonymous. Their names, their thoughts, their poetry and politics came to life. Each glyph became a thread in the tapestry of their civilization, and every deciphered monument brought us closer to understanding a world that had once seemed lost. Modern Maya voices. But perhaps the most important rediscovery was not made in the jungle or in libraries, but in the living communities of Maya descendants. In Guatemala, Belize, Mexico, and Honduras, millions of people still spoke Maya languages. They preserved rituals, stories, and traditions passed down over countless generations. And in time, they would take their place not just as descendants, but as leaders in the study of their own history. Maya scholars, artists, linguists, and activists began to reclaim their heritage, learning to read the glyphs, interpreting the stories, and speaking back to the world that had long spoken for them. The Maya Renaissance had begun. In villages and towns, elders taught the sacred calendar. Priests continued rituals at ancient sites. Children learned to speak both Spanish and Quechua, or Kitch, or Yucatec. Maya authors wrote novels and poetry. Maya archaeologists led excavations. Maya filmmakers told their own stories. What had once been thought lost was now being reborn, not in museums, but in homes, communities, and hearts. Sacred sites, sacred memory. Today, the ancient cities of the Maya are both archaeological wonders and living places of memory. Visitors come from around the world to see the towering temples of Tikal, the serpent shadow of Chichen Itzá, the majestic carvings of Copan, the tranquil beauty of Yaxchilán beside the river. But for the Maya people, these are more than ruins. They are sacred spaces, sites of ancestral power, places where the earth still remembers. At solstices and equinoxes, at harvest and New Year, you may still find Maya communities gathering at these temples, lighting candles, burning copal, speaking prayers in ancient tongues. The past and present meet in these moments. And the story continues. The work still ahead. Though much has been rediscovered, much remains to be learned. Thousands of Maya texts are still untranslated. Many sites remain unexcavated, hidden beneath the forest or the modern cities built above them. Questions linger about trade, science, politics, and daily life. And the work of preservation continues, protecting the sites from looting, tourism, and environmental degradation. But one thing is certain, the Maya story did not end in the past. It lives on, not just in stone, but in living breath, in spoken word, in memory. While the temples, cities, and glyphs tell us much about the Maya's material accomplishments, It is their spiritual worldview that reveals the deepest currents of their civilization. The Maya lived in a cosmos that was not divided between sacred and secular. Everything, from the cycle of the moon to the planting of corn, from the breath of wind to the cry of a jaguar, was woven into a spiritual fabric. To understand the Maya is to enter a world where gods walked among men, time had personality, and every cave, mountain, and star was alive with meaning. The structure of the universe. Maya cosmology was complex and beautiful. They envisioned the universe as a multi-layered structure composed of the heavens above, home to celestial deities, stars, and ancestors. The earthly realm where humans lived, performed rituals, and built cities. The underworld, Xibalba, the place of death, darkness, and transformation. These layers were not isolated, but connected through the world tree, or Chiba, a sacred axis that linked all realms. Its roots reached into Xibalba, its trunk supported the earth, and its branches stretched into the heavens. Temples and pyramids were more than monuments. They were artificial mountains, connecting the human world to the divine. Rituals performed atop these structures were acts of cosmic maintenance. Caves, cenotes, and springs were portals to Xibalba. Pilgrimage and ceremony at these sites ensured the balance between life and death, light and shadow. The Maya did not fear the underworld as a place of eternal punishment. It was a necessary realm where decay made renewal possible. Death, in their eyes, was a transformation, not an end. The gods and their roles. The Maya pantheon was vast, and their gods were not static or singular. Deities could take on multiple forms, young and old, male and female, human and animal, light and shadow. Some of the most important included Itzamnaj, a creator god associated with writing, wisdom, and the heavens. Chak, the rain god, often depicted with a reptilian face and curling nose, who brought storms and nourished crops. Ka'awil, a god of lightning, fertility, and dynastic power, often shown with a torch or serpent emerging from his forehead. Ixchel, the moon goddess, patroness of childbirth, weaving, and healing. Kukulkan, or Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent, associated with wind, knowledge, and the renewal of time. These gods interacted with the world through ritual, offering, and story. They were not distant. They were present, woven into the landscape, into symbols, into daily life. Time as sacred rhythm. One of the most remarkable aspects of Maya thought was their understanding of time. They did not view time as a straight line. It was cyclical, with repeating patterns of creation and destruction, like the seasons, the phases of the moon, or the life cycle of maize. Their calendar systems reflected this. The Tzolk'in, a 260-day sacred calendar used for ritual and divination. The Hab, a 365-day solar calendar. The calendar round, a 52-year cycle where Tzolk'in and Hab intersected. The long count, which tracked vast epochs of time, reaching back to a mythic creation date of 3114 BCE. Each day had a specific energy, a name, a number, and a spiritual meaning. Maya priests and calendar keepers, known as Aj-Kij or day keepers, were trained to interpret these energies and guide decisions accordingly. Birthdays were not just anniversaries, they were destinies, marking a person's spiritual path. Ceremonies, farming, travel, and war were all timed according to the calendar. Time was not passive, it was alive, a force to be respected, understood, and harmonized with. The sacred ball game. The Mesoamerican ball game, known to the Maya as Poctapok, was not merely sport, it was sacred performance. Played in stone courts with a solid rubber ball, the game often required players to strike the ball using hips, knees, and elbows. In elite matches, the stakes were high, even deadly. The game symbolized the cosmic struggle, particularly the myth of the hero twins, Hunahpu and Xbalanque, from the Popol Vuh. These twins descended into Xibalba to face the gods of death, ultimately defeating them through wit and sacrifice. Each ball game reenacted this journey, a battle between darkness and light, life and death, movement and stillness. Some versions of the game ended in ritual sacrifice, usually of captives rather than players, though exceptions exist. These sacrifices were seen not as cruelty, but as sacred offerings, necessary to renew the world. The ball game court was a microcosm of the universe, a place where myth was made real, bloodletting and sacrifice. To the Maya, blood was the most potent offering. Blood was life force, chulel, and its offering created a direct channel between humans and gods. Ritual bloodletting was practiced by rulers, priests, and even nobles. Using obsidian blades, stingray spines, or thorns, participants would pierce their tongue, ears, or genitals, collecting the blood on bark paper and burning it in ceremony. The smoke that rose was believed to carry prayers to the heavens, often producing visions in which gods or ancestors would appear. Human sacrifice also occurred, especially in the context of war. Captives were sometimes offered to the gods during major rituals, ensuring the sun would rise, the rains would fall, and the cycles of time would continue. While this may seem brutal through modern eyes, for the Maya, these acts were expressions of cosmic responsibility, ensuring harmony between worlds, the role of the king, ritual and responsibility. Maya kings were not mere administrators or generals. They were ritual leaders, mediators between the human and divine realms. Their duties included performing bloodletting ceremonies to renew the world, leading festivals aligned with celestial events, communing with ancestors and deities through trance, prayer and vision, embodying the mythic heroes in sacred performances. Every act of governance was also an act of spiritual balance. A drought was not just a natural event. It was a sign that the king had failed in his sacred duties. To maintain ma'at, or cosmic order, the king had to constantly renew his legitimacy through ritual, construction, and display. This made kings both powerful and vulnerable. Their authority rested not just on military might, but on their connection to the sacred. Temples as sacred theatre. Maya temples were designed not only as places of worship, but as stages, where the rituals of kings, priests, and gods could be witnessed by the people. These spaces were symbolic in every detail, aligned with solstices and equinoxes, covered in glyphs and carvings depicting mythic scenes, painted in bright reds, blues, and yellows, colours of spiritual significance. Resonant with sound, some ball courts and chambers were designed to amplify voices, adding drama to ritual. During festivals, entire cities would gather. There would be music, dance, feasting, offerings, and the reading of sacred texts. These were not mere performances. They were acts of cosmic renewal. Every chant, every flame, every drop of blood helped to hold the universe together. The story of the Maya is not one of disappearance, but of endurance. Their cities may now rest in ruin, their monuments worn by rain and time. But the spirit of their civilization is very much alive, in their descendants, their languages, their rituals, and the stories still told under jungle canopies and starlit skies. From the mighty pyramids of Tikal to the sacred cenotes of Chichen Itzá. From the glyphs etched in stone to the whisper of wind through ancient temples. the Maya world continues to speak. In silence, in symbol, in memory. We now understand that this was not a single empire, but a tapestry of kingdoms, beliefs, and rhythms. A civilization that mapped the cosmos, danced with time, and honored the sacred in all things. Their legacy is more than ruins. It is a living thread, woven across centuries. And so, as the night deepens and you drift into sleep, let the memory of the Maya guide you. Through jungle paths, across stone plazas, beneath a sky full of stars, into the dreams of a people who never truly vanished. They are still here, listening, watching, waiting in the echoes of time.